Good morning, good afternoon, good night to everybody around the world. Welcome. We are here at the GCCM in Dubai, and greetings from all of us here and to all of you out there. So I hope you also enjoy as much as we enjoyed here. Today's topic is what is the role and the value of peering in the Middle East. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give my large panel actually a quick minute to introduce themselves. So Martin, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, good afternoon.
Good morning to you. Let's go over to Ali. Ali, please take the moment to introduce yourself quickly.
Good morning to everyone. Ali Al-Ibrahim, presenting Vermontel here. I basically front most of Vermontel's peering activities and operations. In short.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's to Halil. Halil, welcome. Good having you here live.
Likewise, good to be here. My name is Halil Kama, Senior Peering Advisor at Equinix. I look after most of the Middle East operations, Asia, a bit of Europe, and a bit of everywhere, really. But peering, and more peering is what I do.
Thank you so much, and good having you. Bernard, welcome.
Hello, Bernard Push from Telstra. I look after our global internet strategy, a lot of which is peering, and I also sit on the board of AMSEX.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Onno.
Yeah, so Onno Bos, Sales Director at AMSEX. We operate exchanges globally, and here in the MENA region, we operate Manama IX for Betelco. And we will start soon an IX in Egypt as well.
Now that's a scoop. Thank you so much. Thank you. And that live here at the GCCM in Dubai. So good to know. Thank you. And gentlemen, again, honor having you all around the panel. So Martin, if I may invite you, because you and Equinix, you always have a message. So please start your keynote presentation, and we're more than happy to listen to you, to what you have to share with us. So please, Martin.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Absolutely clear.
So just to introduce me, I'm Martin Atkinson. I'm a Senior Manager for Peering and Interconnection in EMEA. I'm part of the business development team. And today, yes, there is a fairly unified message from Equinix. It doesn't change much, but it needs maybe presenting in different ways according to the location and the audience. In esteemed company as I am, I hope I get everything acceptably correct in terms of the peering here, since I'm a panelist with peering ninjas. So the role and value of peering in the Middle East. First, let's start by understanding that we're talking about internet, and internet communications really underpin digital transformation and power the digital economy. Digital economies have proven to be considerably more resilient during the COVID pandemic. And obviously in the Middle East, there's a double imperative in terms of changing the economic dependency upon oil for particularly Gulf states. And so this is a very good time to be looking at the future and what internet services and a digital economy looks like and how to get there for people around the Middle East. I won't dwell on it, but I would urge everyone to go and look for the Internet Society's 2020 overview of internet infrastructure impact in the Middle East, specifically, which is absolutely excellent and calls out both the challenge and also the future for the Middle East, providing certain things are put in place. And this is about moving from the foundations of internet infrastructure, peering ecosystems, digital hubs, through to basically building the foundation for digital transformation for digital economies and the businesses and people that reside in the Middle East region. I'd like to quote this particular GSMA paper as well, which is the mobile economy for Middle East and North Africa. And as you will, I hope, see, again, they mention it's essential for policymakers in Middle East, North Africa to implement policies and best practices that enable affordable services And I would stress the fact here is affordable. This is a real problem that we'll come back to later, and that is that it's not just about availability of bandwidth, it's also about the cost of bandwidth, because expensive bandwidth is as difficult to deal with as no bandwidth. And in fact, one and the same in some respects. So just looking at the performance angle and not at cost at the moment, this has been the endemic problem in the Middle East region for a long time. And that is this, calling out the major hubs around the world for content, or internet content origins, and telecommunication providers and ISP, internet service provider density, located, say, in Frankfurt, Western Europe, for the EMEA region. And the same situation is replicated elsewhere in different regions of the world. So what this means is that if you're not local to the content, then latency is likely to be a problem. And this we looked at actually just 2 years ago at the European Peering Forum, where I presented a paper. We've done some studies for a large gaming organization, one of the biggies out there globally, into just that, the locations where there was a big gaming community that were being very poorly served. There is an unavoidable delay on the client side, obviously, in terms of local network displaying the stuff on screen, which isn't all instantaneous. And so when you take out the unavoidable delay, you're left with an acceptable round trip time, because there is a keyboard to pixel, that is from when you hit something to actually seeing something on screen, which is crucial for gaming, in total of 166 milliseconds. So if you have 130 milliseconds of unavoidable delay, then what you're left with is kind of a window, and you see degraded performance if you don't hit that window. And the further outside that window you are, the worse the performance gets. And so we come up with this, 76, 80 milliseconds round trip time, or even better, 36 milliseconds. And although obviously it's a borderline case, gaming, where there is constant bidirectional communication, that's essential for the flow of the user experience. The same also applies to digital media streamed, and there you've got bandwidth to consider as well. So the things that really affect the user experience are, firstly, location of the content relative to end users, and that is if the co-location is in Western Europe and the gaming person is in the Middle East, or Azerbaijan or Lima in Peru, then they're a long way from the content. So the first thing we can do is bring the content closer to the end users, and that's where co-location comes in. We can talk about the role of carrier neutral co-location in a minute, but also, of course, there has to be adequate bandwidth. And I've already mentioned that it's not just about technically there being enough bandwidth, it also has to be affordable bandwidth, because if people can't afford it, then they tend to restrict the amount of bandwidth that they use, which degrades the end user experience. And then finally, of course, the unseen component, which is really quite substantial, and that's the AS path, which comes down to peering, essentially. If the peering is a shortened hop count, if it's local in the sense of the kind of thing that Internet Exchange particularly facilitates, then the AS path is shortened and the end user experience is good. Generally speaking, transit can involve very meandering routes on the internet backbone, and the result to the end user is frankly disastrous. We had some really, really extreme examples of very, very convoluted AS path, but here's some examples for you. Not just in the Middle East, but kind of around the region. I've removed Latin America, but it was the same kind of experience there. The best case that we had were for Sofia, Istanbul, was 11 milliseconds, and the worst was 48 milliseconds going from Sofia to Istanbul, which are around the corner, internationally speaking, via Frankfurt. And that was actually traffic was tromboning into Germany to be delivered to Istanbul. 48 milliseconds, 33% of the time. Tel Aviv, Istanbul, or Istanbul, Tel Aviv, 68 milliseconds the best, and that's still going via Catania in Sicily, which makes no sense whatsoever since they're pretty adjacent. and Istanbul via Amzix, via Frankfurt, via Tel Aviv, 104 milliseconds. Finally, Dubai Kuwait City, I think this was with GCX in the loop. So instead of the traffic going via Dubai Kuwait City, 33 milliseconds, which is pretty direct. This is round trip time, by the way. Dubai Chennai in India to Kuwait City, 140 milliseconds, 50% of the time. So the user experience would be diabolical. And that's entirely down to the peering policy of the various providers. So we have this Middle East to Europe communication, which tends to be in a corridor of communication, hairpinning in and out of the Europe that we've talked about many times in the past. I won't read through all of the side panel here because there isn't sufficient time. But essentially, to build a digital economy, you need digital hubs with content kept locally. That improves the end user experience. It reduces the cost, all of which is squeezed out, and hop count, bandwidth restrictions, contention, etc., are all removed from the mix, and the user experience is more consistent. This is essential for the growth of a digital economy. So, what have we got today? First, I'd like to start with the fringe case, which is Egypt, which obviously is heavily dependent on Europe because of the submarine cable systems. And at the speed of light, the photons don't care. It's a short hop across the Mediterranean to reach Western Europe from Egypt. So it shows no signs whatsoever of being a peering ecosystem. Not only is there not a peering hub there, and there's no carrier neutral facility either. So I don't see Egypt's dependency on Europe ever changing, quite frankly. But that was used as an example. And in fact, if anything, you see traffic continuing to increase towards France, UK, and Italy. As you can see, limited origins and destinations and dependency on Europe. So hairpinning will continue, and end user experience and latency will always be a problem. I've included Oman here because it's an interesting change that's happening here. Oman is the first nation in the Middle East region where more than 50% of the internet traffic is now not with Europe. It has the highest rate of internet capacity growth in the Middle East, and that's from Telegeography this year. And MC1, our facility, which we operate in partnership with Omantel, has an internet exchange. And our firm joint aim is to build a carrier neutral, true carrier neutral peering ecosystem in Oman, because it's serving a very, very large number of submarine cable systems and a large area of the world. So emerging hub, non-EU traffic is now dominant. Singapore is in there. Pakistan particularly is a huge origin, a huge destination, I should say, for content originating out of the Muscat hub. UAE is really a triumph in terms of growth of diversity of peering locations. And this is because of the network diversity that started to appear in Dubai in particular. Dubai in UAE is responsible, I should say, UAE is responsible for 9% of Middle East internet traffic, and Dubai is a significant contributor to that. We operate Dubai 1 and 2 facilities in partnership with Do and Data MENA. And again, you can see the diversity of origins and destinations there, typical of an emerging peering ecosystem. So the top 3 drivers for public and private peering. Control of costs, quite important, where transit pricing is still high, not so much in EMEA. It's more about performance and consistency and dropping latency, as we mentioned earlier, but also efficient content distribution. A very large proportion of internet traffic is content distribution these days, maybe as much as 80%, and network optimization, which again comes down to straightening out AS path and squeezing latency out. When you look at a peering ecosystem in totality, and I really just wanted to show this, I would like to leave everyone with the idea of an iceberg where the IX, which is the visible component and a very, very essential part of a peering ecosystem, you can't have one without an IX, frankly, is maybe only 10% in terms of the volume of traffic, but it deals with smaller volumes of enormous numbers of peering sessions, whereas 91% of peered content on the internet tends to pass over physical cross connects. And this is the big data flows, maybe terabits per second, and certainly multi-hundred gigs, which maybe makes more economic sense for people to run over physical cross connects than IX ports. And that's kind of the way it breaks down. So you need for a peering ecosystem to have both internet exchange, essential. I would describe it as the icing and cherry on the cake. And the cake itself is the co-location provider and physical cross connects between ASNs in shared co-location space. So traffic, maybe n terabits per second on IX is globally, 10 times n terabits per second passing over physical cross connects inside carrier neutral co-location. In terms of how things grow, and we hope to see more of this in the Middle East, starting with procuring internet services from an incumbent upstream provider, the incumbent ISP delivering transit or internet access, which is the starting point. If you add a carrier neutral data center, ensure cost effective, and this is an important part, cost effective access to increase choice, thereby squeezing margin, not good for the ISP, but extremely good for the end users and quality of experience. And the result then, when you add an IX, is you start to build public peering. The role of IX, there are a number of different models for internet exchange. Commercial and not-for-profits, sometimes called associations, are the most successful models because they kind of rely on market forces. So it's a very light touch from regulator or incumbent that allows this to flourish. And I'm very pleased we have a very enlightened view on that from our partner, Amantel. Allows us to build a carrier neutral peering ecosystem. It's frankly impossible without that kind of good-hearted support. All this is about increasing affordable bandwidth, increasing capacity, shortening AS path, improving latency, and finally then obviously adding private peering. And a mature peering model takes in all of these components. And you see this with the biggest CDNs in the world, that they use all three of these methods to deliver content to their end users with the best end user experience. Just an overview of internet exchanges in the Middle East. There is a real mixture here. The ones that I've highlighted, commercial and associations, are the ones that work. I'm sure I'll get hauled over the coals for this, but government-run IXs really, unless people are very careful, don't necessarily give the kind of user experience and certainly don't provide the business case for people to come in the same way. There is often an element of regulation about them in terms of who may and may not peer. It's no longer about the technicalities and market forces, and it starts to become regulated. From the moment there is heavy-handed regulation, the value of a peering ecosystem starts to be degraded or frankly becomes impossible. Yeah, an interesting overview here from the PCH Internet Exchange Directory, which you can find online. And I'm sure some of this information may be ancient or just plain wrong, but I just wanted to show it there because it's interesting how few ordinary what we're used to in Western Europe and USA, commercial exchanges or associations are missing. Carrier neutral peering ecosystems are locations in which market forces at every point determine who peers with or transits whom. And I just want to leave you with that thought because this is the challenge for some parts of the Middle East. What we have in the panel and certainly at Equinix is almost 20 years of experience showing that that formula works and urging everyone in the Middle East to beware of restrictive practices and regulation that undermines this model. It's only to the detriment of end users and the digital economy. It's a really difficult balancing act, and I'm not belittling that in any way. So that's the challenge really, and the invitation for the Middle East over the coming years in moving from oil dependency to digital economies. I think that's the end of my presentation. I hope I haven't been too long. Oh, just finally, Equinix stands for Equality, Neutrality and Internet Exchange. We were founded in 1998 upon the principles that I've just expanded. So I don't think I need to say any more about that. That's our one message. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and very much interesting, of course, for everybody here and out there. And let me quickly also welcome the audience who made it this morning quite early to be here, but thank you very much for joining us. And Martin, as always, splendid presentation, clear views and everything. One question I do have for you, and then please, panel, jump in if you have a question for Martin. You mentioned that the customer experience is massively, let's say, improved and still needs to be improved, and that it will be more cost effective. On the other hand, I mean, you have to pull out your wallet to make that happen, right? So it's a bit controversially here. So please go.
Controversial, yes. It's really difficult, and actually, it's one of those things that I find quite intriguing when I actually start a little journey in my mind, that the reason that we have local loop unbundling, competitive internet service providers, a healthy peering ecosystem in London, certainly at Links in London, all of that has stemmed to some extent by the encouragement, coercion, and plain regulation by the UK government to force the incumbent BT to be open, and it's taken a long time. Sometimes the commercial imperative runs contrary to the needs of digital transformation at the fundamental level. But if you squeeze these costs out and improve the end user experience, then it facilitates everything that grows on top of it. So it may be contentious. It's a huge challenge. We had the same with BT in the UK. It's an evolution. It doesn't happen overnight, and it needs people to be insightful and understanding of what it takes to fuel a digital economy.
Oh, absolutely, and then I think one of the examples is, let's say, the partnership with Omantel, of course, on the MC1, which you did. So thank you, Martin, and thank you, Equinix, for sharing the information with us and teaching us a little bit more about and the audience about what's going on in the Middle East and North African region. So
one comment.
Please, I was just inviting on it.
Well, I hope that in a couple of years' time we can prove you wrong regarding Egypt. When we start our IX there.
That would be fantastic. Honestly, I'd love to tell you what, I'd love to do this presentation again in a year or two and show how the pie chart changes. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Be good for all of you.
Yeah, and, another comment, perhaps you know it, but the Kuwait IX, in my opinion, is quite successful recently. They now have about 17 or 18 parties connected to it, which in the region is quite a lot. But you didn't highlight it as one of the successful ones because it's run by the government, I guess. But still, I want to point out that in the last 2 years, they become relatively successful.
That's great. Yeah, well, I would say that, you know, it really depends upon having a light touch, does it not? You can't over-regulate and say who can peer and who can't. It starts to break down at that point. It requires quite a great deal of insight and expertise to run an IX well, in my opinion. Yeah. I'm sure you agree.
Thank you, Martin. Well, we have the specialists around the table, which I really all next to honor, of course, because he always takes the floor. get involved. So Ali, if I may start with you. I mean, just a quick overview from all of you on the peering in the IX landscape. What do you see in the region here? What's going on? And you might probably even not agree with Martin, but let's see. So Ali, please, what's your view on the region?
I think Martin touched on most of the essential points that we're currently facing in the Middle East market. You've seen the illustrations of the latency that, you know, inherently we in the Middle East had to go and fetch our content from Europe. You're talking about 140 to 170 milliseconds based on the systems you're connecting to or using to connect to into Europe. But yeah, having internet exchanges locally changes the whole landscape for us and our customers also. We're getting a much better response in terms of customer experience. The speeds they connect to the content, the experience they're getting, it's totally different. So yes, I think regional players or operators need to really start speaking to each other and getting this peering interconnection going on to avoid this high latency traffic exchange in other regions rather than happening locally here with us.
Thank you. So Halil, from a London perspective, how would you characterize this region and what's the value for peering for this region?
Sure. Well, we have two perspectives. We have a Links London perspective. Obviously, 1,000 ASs, known globally as one of the largest internet exchange operators, as well as Amazon, obviously, in the world. But we also have a JEDIX point of view. So, with STC in Jeddah, Saudi. So that's my key focus for today, and it really gives us a great insight into what we've been working with in the region in terms of speaking to STC and trying to change their approach in the marketplace for what is coming in the years to come, in 2030, 2040, looking at a longer view rather than what they can achieve now. As Martin said in the start of his presentation, things are shifting from an oil-based economy, right? And they're trying to digitalization is coming, and they're trying to make that forefront of the economy in Saudi and the Gulf in general, the Middle East. Everyone is trying to catch on to it as best as they can. In order to do that, you need an ecosystem, and that's where peering comes in. That's where data center comes in. Cable landing stations. All of us have a big part to play within that. But the main factor here, nothing can be done without regulation. So the regulatory interests in the Middle East are much different to Europe. The landscape that we have in Europe is very relaxed. It's a very open environment for doing business and peering. So it's a lot more easier to do what we need to do as a peering ecosystem. Now we are replicating that within Saudi and within JEDIX. We launched end of 2019. Currently, as it stands, obviously we were hit by the pandemic like everyone else. We travel into the region, see who we want to see. Necessarily move as fast as we can, but we've gained a lot of traction in the last 18 months or so, to the point we've hit 196 gig in traffic just over the last week, and that's with just under 10 members on the exchange. So I call them members, they're actually customers. In London, they're members to us, but in Jeddah, obviously it's customers. So that's a great feat. So bearing in mind, UAE as an example, they're a great run exchange. They have a far greater amount of customers on the exchange there. They're doing about 260, 270 gig in traffic.
Don't forget the Manama IX.
And Manama IX, of course, yeah. They're also doing a great amount of traffic as well. But it's showing the levels of traffic that can be achieved, right, from just the small amount of numbers in the community exchanging traffic locally. That's the key here. Everyone wants a better user experience. Everyone wants 4K streaming. I mean, there is a heavy amount of gaming users in the UAE, within Saudi, all over the region that want a better user experience. So all of these things can't come with tromboning your traffic from Marseille or London or Amsterdam. You need it locally. And that's where the discussion comes in for bringing the local content, bringing the large players, the Googles, Akamai's, Facebooks, etc., all locally to the region. That's what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, thank you, Halil. So, Ono, now the floor is yours. Tell me, because you were trying to interrupt everybody.
No. Okay.
So
sorry.
no, please. That's exactly why you're here, because you bring the valuable things to the table. So, from your perspective, and from maybe as well from the M6 perspective, how do you characterize, let's say, this region, or what is needed, or what should we do better, or what's your view on this one?
Well, a lot of things are still the same, like it used to be years ago. When I first came here about 15 years ago, you had the Etisalat.
50 or 15?
15.
Okay.
You had Etisalat and Do, and there are still Etisalat and Do. So the competition is not that much there. If you look at the AS present in the Middle East, and you need an AS to connect to an internet exchange, The highest ranking country for the AS numbers is Iraq, with about 180 AS numbers. And then there's Saudi Arabia, also about 180, UAE 100, but it's still very small compared to the AS present in, for example, Europe or the US, where there are, in the US, I believe, 25,000 AS numbers. So there's a lot of room to grow here, but you see it happening as well. STC announced yesterday a 400 million investment in data centers in the region. Oracle Cloud announced that they will be present in Neom in Saudi Arabia, the new city they are building. We see a lot of other companies building data centers. So there's a lot of activity, but a lot of the IXs are still not successful. They have a very limited amount. So there's a lot of room to grow in the region. That is my view. But you see the Oracle's coming, the Microsoft coming, the content coming to the Middle East. So it will change over the years, but there's still a lot to do.
Okay, thank you. So, Bernard, I mean, it's nice to have the people from Omantel and from Equinix and from Links and the AM6, and they all have to make their point, of course. So, from your point of view, from a Telstra point of view, I mean, specialized, of course, in Asia. I mean, a nice acquisition on the mobile side now, as we know. But from an IX and from a peering point of view, how do you see and how can you characterize, let's say, the region? From your perspective?
It's kind of interesting looking at it from outside, in that I think what's happening now is kind of the second phase of what's happened with internet exchanges, right? So kind of phase one was, you know, when I came to the region first in 2011, the internet performance was as abysmal. I mean, it was really terrible getting onto the internet. But having more content locally in region has helped a lot, and brought the internet experience to a pretty good level now. But people talk about the Middle East, but it's actually a vast region. I mean, you know, Dubai is actually closer to Asia than it is to Europe. 75 milliseconds to Asia on a submarine cable, about 120 to Europe. You've got the Gulf, the Levant, what I would call the Levant, and North Africa, which is probably closer to Europe, which is why it probably appear in Europe primarily. And I think what's needed now is what we've also seen in Asia, in fact, is where you're going from just having a couple of core internet peering points in one or two markets in Asia, it's typically Singapore, Hong Kong, Tokyo, to where as the requirement for content, video content, low latency content is going up, you've got to get the content ever closer to the users. And it's no good having it 1,000 kilometers away or 2,000 kilometers away. You want it actually closer. So getting more internet exchanges around the region is actually a good thing and necessary thing, I would say. Because a lot of the content players, the CDNs especially, are trying to get closer. And those internet exchanges are basically the thing that starts the whole process of getting the ecosystem together. Without them, that ecosystem can't get together. But I think what's still missing is, I think as people have pointed out, is this whole interconnection between those data centers. So most of the content providers, their currency of bandwidth is 10 gig. I mean, they don't do anything with less than 10 gig. If a 10 gig costs over, you know, $10,000 to $20,000 a month within the region, it just becomes very difficult to integrate the content. And so you don't put the content into as many places, and then the performance doesn't happen. So we understand the requirement to kind of sort of linked in with taxation in this region, I know, in many cases. But I think, you know, this whole transit zone philosophy that's being done here in the UAE maybe could be extended around the region where you know, bandwidth between the transit zones is kept low in some way. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. It's always good to have, let's say, the operator's view on this one as well. All right. So we talked already a little bit about customer experience in Martin's presentation. We talked a little bit about challenges and where might be a bit of growth. But Ali, if I may come to you, how can a reliable peering ecosystem ensure increased network resilience? I mean, I really want to get a little bit more into the subject now. So,
yeah, well, from our point of view as Remantel, you know, resilience only comes with, you know, a healthy peering ecosystem. So we try to keep as many redundant direct connections with our partners in different geographical locations, just to make sure that traffic is steady, latency is optimum, and there's always a proper steady traffic flow coming towards us. Then again, peering, when we look at it when we're dealing directly with our partners, I think it's much easier for us operators to scale our traffic and capacities with these content players when it comes to periods like the pandemic, the ones we faced in the beginning of the pandemic, when the demand for data and content was soaring. So lots of upgrades needed to happen really quick to meet the customer demand. And with these content players being sitting here locally with us, communicating directly with us, I think it makes it much easier for us to scale and make this environment more resilient and with better quality. So yeah, I think it's always easier to connect directly rather than go and deal with multiple hop transit operators that might not give you the exact quality or experience that your customers are looking for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Moving a bit on, and then again tipping a bit on the customer experience, because Martin, and you mentioned already your 1 or 2 points. How can peering at the local internet exchange lead to an improvement of the customer experience?
Well, I think the slide that I showed where we did just over 2 years ago, we did AS path traces and linked them to the latencies of communications for gaming. And it's quite clear that, well, it's kind of ironic really. IX shortens AS path and produces a much greater improvement in round trip time, providing that sufficient capacity is provided by the network service providers or the ISPs, and that itself is another issue. Peering policy was one of the things that I called out at the European Peering Forum. Was peering policy of ISPs is critical here as well. They have to keep in view not necessarily the balance sheet. Obviously, that's essential for any organization or company that's commercial, but the end user experience should be paramount. And so IX is essential in straightening out the AS path, quite frankly. The importance of local IX, as my fellow panelists have mentioned, is that it prevents traffic hairpinning to reach globally significant IXs such as AM6, DKIX, and links, which is kind of ironic because tromboning to a large IX is also a real possibility, which kind of undermines the whole proposition of keeping traffic local. And it was clear in some of my AS path measurements, that's exactly what was happening. So we all have to be mindful, ISPs, IXPs, etc., that keeping traffic local is the aim, and it's founded on good performance and economic foundations.
Okay, thank you. Quickly moving on, gentlemen, because we do not have that much time. So I still want to cover, let's say, a couple of things and pinpoint on them. So, Onno, what do you think are, I mean, and we tipped on it already a little bit, but what is really needed? What are or even what should be the key drivers actually for the region? And maybe you can take into that aspect as well. What can be done to improve peering opportunities in the region? So, double question actually.
Yeah, difficult one. Well, I think that one of the important things is that the local ISPs that they connect to the internet exchanges as well. Mm-hmm. And quite often they are not that willing to do so because they can get more money from IP transit. So there needs to be done something, for example, that the government, that they connect to the IX and that they force the ISPs to also connect if they want their customers to be able to access the government topics like your taxes, mm-hmm. that you need to pay your taxes online, and force the ISPs to connect to the exchange. That would make a big change. Okay,
Ali?
Everything that Ono said. I mean, from a Links and JEDIX perspective, as I said earlier, the regulation and the environment needs to change. So when Links was founded, BT was one of the founding members of Links, so one of the founding networks, should I say. If that wasn't the case, I think things would be a lot different for us. I wouldn't be here, I think. And saying that to say that BT is an incumbent in the UK. If the Middle East operators took the same approach with peering, BT has a very relaxed peering policy. They will peer with most networks, regardless of size, right? Unless there's a commercial arrangement in the background, but it's very rare that they decline a peering request. In the Middle East, it's not the case that Adu, Salat, or STC will directly peer unless there is a commercial arrangement between them or paid peering that's happening in the background. So if that changes, then the ecosystem will thrive. But then it boils down to what we said earlier. We want to create the ecosystem more relaxed, so that more networks, the local operators, the smaller ISPs, the startups, everyone can peer within that ecosystem. And once you're building that ecosystem, that's where the true wealth is for the network and for the users of that network. So it's the regulation, essentially, and the strategy going forward. You can't rely on IP transits, because obviously it's a monopoly environment here, right? So it's operated by the large telcos, the incumbents here. So they need to be the ones spearheading the open peering policies and being open to peering with people and seeing that the revenue will not necessarily come, that they'll obviously lose transit revenue they're receiving in the short term. Long term, they're going to be receiving it in other areas. So that's what they need to focus on. That's how we see it.
Okay. Ben, you quickly from an operator perspective, we would like to go on to be, because how do you see where the majority of the growth could come from, or what are the key drivers? Let's say, but the bigger part of the region.
Well, we found that whilst every carrier is trying to protect their transit revenue,
of course,
it's actually astute peering can actually increase the volume very drastically, very fast, in fact, quicker, in fact, than having your salespeople out there selling in some cases. So even though I'm responsible for our global internet sales, I spend actually a lot of my time on peering because it's so fundamental to producing the AS path, because AS path BGP is magic sometimes. You just reduce the AS path and all of a sudden traffic just starts to flow. It comes from nowhere. So more focus on it from carriers and slightly realizing that what end users, it's the ultimate end user experience that will drive the traffic growth. If you can build a short AS path for your users, you can help the content providers to get closer and therefore give better performance to the users, which means requirement for having content in more places around the region. It's no good just having one Middle East. Middle East is massive, as I said. It's going to need to be multiple places. and an open peering policy. I mean, and the bandwidth is the other thing that really needs to evolve from a pricing perspective, I think. The cables are there. Montel has been quite busy in developing a lot of those, but it's the cost of inter-regional capacity, I'd say, still that needs to evolve.
Okay, so gents and Martin, if I may start with you. Okay, what developments do we need? Maybe extra or more, or what do you see will come for the region? So I'm not really asking your crystal ball, but just a small part of it only. Well, what do you see is coming? How do you see it's the situation will be here in the Middle East and Northern America and Northern Africa?
Well, so I mean, generally speaking, throughout the world, and obviously some places faster than others, as you expect in the West, where we've got deregulation, where peering ecosystems thrive, pervasive computing, digital transformation, the digital economy is exploding really in all sorts of ways, and we see it every day with frankly miraculous innovation, which my generation does look like magic, and to think BGP is magic is behind it. Is a truism, it really is. I would say to the extent to which capacity is sufficient for end user needs, and that's a tricky one, I know, because when you look at the experience of Asia Pacific, where they went to fiber to the home with gigabit speeds to end users, some power users immediately consume their gigabit of capacity. And so it puts an enormous pressure on the backbone. But as that's dealt with, the digital transformation increases. So I'd say the analogy is like a tap. If you increase capacity, you reduce costs and you make it accessible to everyone, then the traffic flows at an astonishing rate out of nowhere, and the digital transformation is speeded up. So I would say it's going to happen. It's just it happens slowly or quickly, depending upon regulator and incumbent telco ISPs' behavior. So the nations will change across EMEA, across Middle East, based upon how they deal with the digital age that we are now in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ali. What's your how does the future look in the region?
I think it's getting better. It looks bright from my perspective. I think we're following the same model or approach that Halil mentioned earlier, which BT took with Links. We've ventured into a great and excellent joint venture with Equinix. We've realized the dream of having a data center, NIX, and now I think we're in, as we speak, we have ongoing discussions with most of the regional operators in the Middle East, STC, Etisalat, and Batelco, and most of the people. It's getting closer. We have some direct peering sessions with some of them, but we need to have all of them on board now. Those discussions are happening. And more submarine cable systems terrestrially to connect the Middle East countries together. That's happening also, ongoing projects. And we have some new submarine cable systems coming in, connecting the Middle East, Eastern Africa, and beyond towards Asia and Europe. So I think that's making it much more easier for this ecosystem to grow and become more healthy, hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Halil, how do you see the region? I mean, what's there to expect? I mean, what latest do you see, and are we going in the right direction? How can you contribute to it?
Well, I think we're at a really exciting time. I think we're at a pivoting point here, where we're at the start of just the curve changing for the peering ecosystem, and it really taking off. And we're at the very, very start of that. For us at JEDIX and /Link/STC, our partners there, from what we're doing there and the perspective that we see is obviously continued growth at JEDIX, possible new sites, obviously the 2030 vision that the kingdom has for NEOM and creating a whole digital hub for the region is what we're focusing on, looking to achieve. So for that's our main focus, but we can only do that if all of the factors that the whole panel has been speaking about is actually attributed to, and everyone works towards that goal. But the great thing is that there is a change of thoughts and a change of thought and change of processes, and there's a readiness to adapt, which is the big thing here. That hasn't been the case in the telco space for a while in the region, right? And the fact that a peering ecosystem, once it's there and it's established, then you can just only add to it, and then hopefully become to the level of London or AMSIX or whatever DGIX maybe in Europe to reach a European level of peering, but for the Middle East and keeping everything local. That's how I see it.
Okay, cool. Bernard, because as we know, we just learned that Dubai is closer to Asia than it's close than to Europe. So you play a big role in Asia. So what do you see is common, and how can you contribute to it as Telstra?
So look, we'll continue to focus on connecting this region to Asia. I think what's good, I think I'm optimistic about this region is the fact that we've now evolved from an environment where kind of got one or two internet exchanges in the region to kind of having a multitude of them spread around, each of them starting to grow. And I think that's what's required is that you don't just have one exchange, like there isn't one exchange in any particular region. Needs more exchanges closer to the users. So, and that's going to become more important as we evolve to 5G mobile, and people are expecting to have a better performance from gaming, from video, from everything else. Content's got to be closer to the user, and so you need more exchanges. And so I only welcome the fact that we're talking about all these new exchanges around the region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so exciting enough. That's what you're saying. Yeah. Oh no, some famous last words from you. Well, and how will you contribute? How will the AMSIX contribute?
Well, I think that everything has been said. More access, more data centers being built, the content coming over to the region. That is happening. We as AMSIX, we look forward to play a even more active role in this region. Mm-hmm. And also my colleague Noah, responsible for the Middle East, she is really looking forward to be here a lot more and to do a lot of business. So,
okay, cool. So I think that that counts for everybody around the table. And with those words, gentlemen, if you allow me, I would like to end this session. And I would first of all would like to thank Martin and Equinix, of course, for sponsoring this session here live and actually hybrid from Dubai. Martin, hopefully we'll see you next time live here again at the GCCM, and I'm happy to listen to whatever you had to share. So it's very interesting. Ali, of course. Big thank you and my greetings to the beautiful city of Muscat, and thank you for being here. And of course the gentlemen here, so Halil, Bernard, and Ono, the audience, even if you've been there, thank you so much, and for joining this session. And today we were talking about the role and what peering does for the region. And we had a quick peek on how customer experience can improve, where the growth is, and how we can move on, especially in this in the large part of this region. So again, thank you so much for everybody out there. Thank you for joining in virtually. Please stay tuned with us also here, because within the hour we move on with another panel session and interesting topics. So. Thank you very much. And again, Ali, Martin, Bernard, Ono, and Halil, thank you so much. And the audience, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.